I never thought a simple vacation message would be the thing to make everything feel colder than it already was. I was at the kitchen table, the same seat I've sat in every morning for years, with a mug of coffee warming my palms and the hum of the refrigerator filling the quiet. Outside, the sky was pale and still, and for once, I didn't mind the silence until my phone lit up with a text from Amanda. "You're not invited to our Hawaii trip. My husband prefers just his family." That was it. No explanation. No attempt to soften the blow. Just a firm boundary, delivered like I was a problem they'd finally decided to solve. For a long time I didn't move. I just sat there staring at the words, trying to find something in them that wasn't there. Not even a, "hope you understand." And maybe that's what hit hardest. The way it was said, like a final decision, not up for discussion. I looked up from the screen at the walls around me, filled with framed photos that had hung in the same spots for decades. Amanda in her preschool graduation cap. Amanda and me fishing in Montana. Amanda on her wedding day, smiling in a way that made me think we were still close. Back then, I believed I was helping her build something solid, not standing in the way of the life she wanted. But I know who made the call. Bryce has always been the type to want things his way. And slowly, year after year, he's been working to make sure that his way doesn't include me. He called me a burden once, thinking I wouldn't hear it. I did, I remember. I didn't text back. There wasn't anything I could say that wouldn't sound like begging. Instead, I sat in that chair and let the coffee go cold. The silence didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt like I'd finally been pushed out of something I built with my own two hands. And they'd forgotten one important detail. The house they live in? I paid for part of it, and I didn't give it to them. Exactly 1 month before that message, I stood inside a small credit union office on 17th and Fremont, watching a teller in a blue vest process a wire transfer for $68,000. I remember the number because I'd written it myself on the memo line of the cashier's check that morning, and because that was the day I thought I was helping my daughter build something lasting. They had found a craftsman-style home in Portland, 3 bedrooms, white trim, a modest backyard with just enough space for a dog and a toddler's sandbox. Amanda said they couldn't quite reach the down payment, and Bryce had tried everything. When she called, her voice trembled just enough to make me think she hated asking. I didn't even hesitate. Told her I'd go down to the branch that same afternoon and take care of it. I'd sold an old parcel of timberland last year, and the cash had just been sitting there in my Fidelity account. I figured what better use for it than helping my daughter raise her family under a solid roof. As the teller printed the wire confirmation and asked me to initial, I looked around the office. Beige walls, potted plant in the corner, the faint smell of toner in the air. It wasn't much of a moment, but for some reason, I remember feeling proud. Not for the money, but because I thought I was doing what a father should. Bryce didn't come to the signing, said he was stuck in a work meeting. But when Amanda slid the final documents across the table later that week, I noticed something else. He had removed my name from all communications. My involvement became something to keep quiet. He didn't want outside hands in their finances, he told Amanda. And she, like she's done too often since marrying him, nodded along without pushing back. That should have been the moment I paused. Should have asked more questions, read between more lines. But I didn't. I trusted them. I walked out of that credit union thinking I'd just helped my daughter take a step toward independence. Turns out, I'd handed them the tool they'd later try to bury me with. Looking back, that message about Hawaii wasn't the beginning. It was the final confirmation of something I hadn't wanted to admit. It started subtle. Last Father's Day, no call, no card, not even a text. Amanda said later she forgot, and Bryce had scheduled something last minute. I let it go. Thought maybe they were overwhelmed, Maybe the baby wasn't sleeping, maybe life just got loud. Then came the silence. Texts left unanswered. Invitations turned vague. They skipped the 4th of July barbecue. Said the drive was too far, though I lived just 2 hours down the interstate. Amanda used to call me every week. Now it was once a month, if that, and always rushed. Still, I didn't say a word. I told myself not to read into it. But when the baby shower list came out, and my name wasn't on it, I stopped making excuses for them. I found out by accident. I was at the garden center, picking up mulch for the backyard, when I ran into Claire, Amanda's college roommate. She smiled and asked if I'd be going to the big shower in Lake Oswego. I just stared at her for a moment, not sure if I'd misheard. I hadn't. She said it was ladies only, Bryce's family hosting. Amanda had told her I wasn't much for parties. That night I went home and opened a beer I didn't want, sat on the back porch, and just stared out into the yard where Amanda used to play with our old golden retriever, laughing until she fell in the grass. I remembered her telling me once, when she was maybe 10, that she never wanted to be one of those people who made their parents feel small. Now here I was, shrinking. Bryce had been calling me her old man with outdated values in front of his friends. I know because my neighbor heard him say it at a cookout and had the decency to tell me. That was the moment something cracked. This wasn't a drift. This was a pattern. And that pattern ended the day they made me feel like a stranger to the child I raised. I didn't sleep much that night. The house felt colder, though the thermostat said otherwise. I sat in my office, the old leather chair creaking beneath me as I leaned back and stared at the shelf where my files were stacked. Neat, labeled, mostly untouched since I retired. I reached for the one that mattered now. The folder was navy, thick, and heavier than I remembered. Loan agreement, Amanda and Bryce, home purchase. I opened it slowly, smoothing out the pages like they might still be warm from the printer. I read every line again, not because I doubted what was in there, but because I needed to feel it in my hands, proof that I hadn't just handed them that house with a hopeful smile. There it was, halfway down page 3. Loan subject to revocation if terms of participation, respect, or communication with lender are willfully broken. Their signatures sat neatly underneath it, both of them, written in blue ink with a notary stamp beside it. I remember the conversation we had before they signed. I'd insisted we treat the money formally. Amanda looked uneasy, but Bryce had smiled, said it was smart business. I told them it wasn't a gift. It was support, and support had conditions. They nodded. They probably never thought I'd enforce any of it. But that night, sitting in the same chair where I used to help Amanda with homework, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't grieving their distance anymore. I wasn't confused or hurt. I was done being small so they could feel tall. I logged into my Fidelity account and checked the note I'd left in the transaction record. Conditional housing loan for Amanda Jennings and Bryce Holloway. Revocable upon breach of mutual respect or good faith. Clear as day. They could try to paint me as old-fashioned, bitter, petty, but I had more than feelings. I had paperwork. And the thing about paperwork is, it doesn't lie, doesn't forget, doesn't care if you think your father's too soft to act. That's when it all became real. Not just what they'd done, but what I was going to do next. The next morning, I called Lydia. We'd known each other for over 20 years. She handled the contracts back when I expanded my construction business, helped me navigate zoning hell in '09, and rewrote my estate plan after my wife passed. Always professional, always sharp. Never one for small talk unless it served a purpose. Her voice was exactly the same as it had always been. Calm, clipped, focused. You said you'd call only if something was serious, she said. It is. She cleared her calendar for me without hesitation. I drove downtown, parked in the same garage I used to use for city permits, and walked up to her corner office. Lydia's place hadn't changed much, still smelled faintly of old paper and leather. Tall bookshelves lined the walls, law volumes worn at the edges but never dusty. A brass desk lamp glowed against the mahogany. She looked up over her glasses as I walked in, gestured to the seat across from her. I slid the navy folder across her desk and said, "I want to know exactly what this gives me the right to do." She didn't respond right away. She read, line by line, her pen tapping against the edge of the desk in slow, steady rhythm. Then she leaned back and looked at me, not with pity, not with surprise, just with that clear-eyed steadiness that told me I hadn't imagined any of this. "This clause here," she said, pointing to the revocation line, "gives you leverage most people forget to ask for. They signed it, notarized, filed. This isn't symbolic, Richard. It's enforceable." I nodded, feeling the weight shift inside my chest. It wasn't relief, not exactly. More like confirmation that I hadn't lost my grip on reality, that what they did had consequences, and I wasn't crazy for expecting them to face them. "So, what are my options?" She didn't hesitate. "You can rescind the financial support, file a formal notice with the county and force a sale of the house. And the risk? You'll burn what's left of your relationship." I looked at her. They already lit that match. We sat there for a while, not talking. The kind of silence that isn't awkward, just necessary. Lydia tapped her pen against her legal pad, waiting. I stared out her window at the traffic inching through downtown like nothing in the world had changed. But something had. For me, everything had shifted the moment Amanda's message came through. This was just the paperwork catching up to it. "I don't want revenge," I finally said. "I didn't think you did," she replied. "I want my investment back. That house was never meant to be a gift. And I want them to understand that family doesn't mean free access to someone's life, time, and savings." Lydia nodded slowly, then wrote something down. "We'll start by filing a revocation of financial support. I'll prepare a notice of intent to initiate sale proceedings and send them formal copies. Once that's in motion, the house can't be refinanced, sold, or used as collateral without your say." I watched her write the words, so clean, so calm, and felt something settle in me. Not satisfaction, not power, just clarity. For 3 years, I'd let myself believe that saying yes made me a good father, that staying quiet preserved what was left of the family Caroline and I built. But all it did was teach Amanda and Bryce that I could be counted on to give, not to say no. That ended now. "File everything," I said. "Trigger the sale clause." Lydia didn't flinch. She just nodded again and slid a fresh folder toward me for signatures. "We'll need to act quickly. Once they receive notice, they'll either panic or fight. I'm ready for either." She smiled, faint and tired. "You're not the first parent I've helped claw something back, but you're one of the few who came prepared." I left her office with the kind of focus I hadn't felt in years. Not righteous, not vengeful, just rooted. My steps felt different walking to the truck. I wasn't reacting anymore. I had a plan. And whether they liked it or not, I was following through. Back home, I dug in deeper. The folder was strong on paper, but if Bryce was the kind of man I suspected he was, there'd be something else. Some move he made early, assuming I'd never look closely. And I had time now. I wasn't waiting on anyone's permission to examine what I'd helped them build. Amanda had once asked me to help fix her laptop, back when she was on maternity leave, and Bryce had spilled a smoothie across the keyboard. She never changed the password after I got it working again. Her email still synced to the old family account, and when I checked, it was still logged in on the desktop in my basement workshop. It wasn't something I'd planned to open. But now, I opened the trash folder out of habit, just scanning. There it was, an email from a mortgage broker, time-stamped 2 weeks after the house closed. The subject line was clear. Follow-up, equity line without cosigner. I opened it slowly, the way you open something that might confirm everything you don't want to believe. Bryce had contacted a lender, not to consolidate debt or lower the rate, but to pull cash out of the home equity, without me, without telling Amanda, based on the broker's reply. He was, quote, exploring solo options. The message had been deleted, but not permanently, and it wasn't old. He had sent it at a time when they were still smiling at me across the dinner table, still thanking me for all the help. Meanwhile, he was trying to turn my money into his leverage. I printed the email, checked the headers, logged the time, and set it aside in a fresh folder marked documentation. I'd been in construction too long to trust memory over paper. Standing in that basement, surrounded by tools older than Amanda, I felt something tighten, not just anger, but confirmation. He hadn't just excluded me. He'd tried to move the money around like I was dead. Now I had more than a signed clause. I spread everything out across the drafting table in the back room, the one I used to measure blueprints on when I still took jobs from city developers. These days it mostly held saw blades, invoices, and the occasional half-finished birdhouse. But today it became a war table. The agreement, the wire transfer confirmation, the email Bryce thought he'd buried, my notes, handwritten and dated, each one listing the moments they'd crossed a line, from the baby shower to that message about Hawaii. I lined everything up like phases of a project, each with a header: action, proof, response. It wasn't enough to be angry. I needed a record. I needed sequence. And if they decided to fight, if Bryce thought bluster and arrogance would carry the day, he'd be walking into a structure far more solid than his ego. I printed a calendar and circled key dates: wire transfer on May 12th, signing on May 15th, the deleted email, June 3rd. That alone told a story, not of misunderstanding, but premeditation. By noon, I'd put together a binder. Not fancy, just a simple black one with dividers and sticky tabs. It wasn't for Lydia. Not yet. It was for me. A way to get everything out of my head and onto the page, where it couldn't be twisted by memory or emotion. Upstairs, I poured a cup of coffee, black and sharp, and stood by the window for a while. Across the street, a couple of neighborhood kids were riding their bikes in lazy loops. Their laughter carried faint on the air, same way Amanda's used to. I used to think staying quiet was the high road, that if I just kept giving, things would right themselves. But looking down at that binder, I felt something stronger than pride. Readiness. They built their comfort on my silence, on the belief that I wouldn't challenge their story. That changed today. The story now has dates, signatures, and receipts. The message came in at 6:42 p.m. No greeting, no explanation, just Bryce. Stop snooping. You're not part of this family anymore. I stood in the garage when I read it, sorting socket wrenches I hadn't used since last fall. The same garage Amanda and I painted together when she was 13. A surprise for Caroline, her Mother's Day gift, back when gestures still meant something. I stared at the message for a long time. Not because it surprised me, but because of how fast he'd cracked. The timing told me he knew I was digging. Maybe Amanda found the email missing. Maybe he noticed the shift in Amanda's voice. Either way, the panic bled through his words. You're not part of this family anymore. That's what stuck, like he was the one holding the gate. Like family was his to assign or revoke, as if the decades I carried that girl on my back through every hard season didn't count anymore, because he put a ring on her finger. I didn't reply, but I saved the text, screenshot and all, time-stamped and backed up. That's what men like him never understand. Threats spoken in confidence feel powerful, but written ones become evidence. Then, just as I was placing the phone down, Another message followed. If you interfere anymore, we'll take legal action. This is your warning. My hand didn't shake. My jaw did set. Threats were nothing new to me. I'd faced harder men in union halls, in negotiation rooms, across bitter family tables after funerals and foreclosures. But Bryce wasn't hardened. He was polished. He used words like currency and intimidation like punctuation. And right now he was starting to realize that whatever game he'd been playing, I'd finally learned the rules and brought better tools. I added both screenshots to the binder, labeled under escalation. Then I sat down at the workbench and finished sorting the wrenches, wiping down the metal with slow, methodical care. Bryce wanted control. But control isn't about speaking louder. 2 days later, I was back in Lydia's office, binder in hand, jaw set. She didn't ask what happened. She just opened the folder and started flipping through the latest editions. The text messages were enough to confirm intent. But the next layer? That came from Lydia herself. She'd done some digging of her own, pulled a utilities record that listed Amanda as the primary account holder. It wasn't just overdue. It was delinquent, months behind, hidden under auto-pay failures and quietly accumulating fees. They're not managing the property, she said, placing the printout beside my binder. This isn't just emotional anymore, this is financial negligence. I didn't nod. I didn't need to. It was exactly what I expected. Then came the second page, an invoice from a local contractor. New windows, signed off using my name. My signature, forged. Lydia slid it toward me carefully, as if not to set off a fire. This came from a tip through my paralegal's cousin. They've been asking around about refinancing and upgrades. And this, she tapped the signature line, is a felony. I looked down at it. It was close. Not perfect, but close. Enough to get by if no one was checking. I never authorized any work, I said. I know, she replied, and they're using your money, your name, and your silence to do it. She closed the binder, slowly and with purpose. You have enough here to make a civil claim. But if we want to push harder, criminal misrepresentation, financial fraud, we can do that too. You just have to decide how far you want to take it. I sat back in the chair and exhaled. Bryce thought the worst I could do was send a strongly worded email. What he didn't know, what he still hadn't grasped, was that I never start fights. But I finish what's brought to my door. And now I had proof. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a messy family disagreement. It was a neighbor who told me about the listing. Doug, 2 houses down from Amanda and Bryce, ran into me at the hardware store while I was picking up wood glue. Said he'd seen something odd. A carload of strangers pulling into their driveway late Friday nights, luggage in hand. Thought maybe they had family visiting, he said, but it's every weekend now. Same kind of crowd. One of them asked me where the key box was. I didn't say much at the time. Just nodded. Let it sit. Back home, I opened my laptop and pulled up Airbnb. It didn't take long. The address wasn't listed directly. Smart enough to use a custom title, but the photos gave it away. The white trim. The vintage lamp in the corner I'd given Amanda when she moved out. The porch swing that used to be mine. I clicked through the calendar. Booked solid. Friday to Sunday almost every weekend for the past 2 months. Average nightly rate, $380. They weren't struggling. They were profiting. And they were doing it in secret, quietly cashing in on the very house I helped buy, the one Bryce tried to tell me wasn't mine to touch. It wasn't just the money. It was the erasure, renting out my contribution while cutting me off like I didn't exist. I took screenshots of the entire listing, calendar, rates, guest reviews. One comment even mentioned the hosts being helpful and responsive. Hosts, plural. So Bryce could say I wasn't part of their family, But he had no problem playing landlord with my investment. I sent the files to Lydia that night. Her reply came within the hour. "This changes everything. We'll use it all." I closed the laptop, turned off the lamp, and sat in the dark for a while. They didn't just take advantage of me. They used what I gave, the house, the help, the quiet, and turned it into something that served only them. They thought I'd never find out. But now, I had everything I needed. That night, I sat in Caroline's old reading chair, the one by the living room window that still creaks if you lean just a little too far to the left. I hadn't touched it in months, not since I dusted off her books and set them back in the order she liked. She always kept poetry near the bottom, easier to reach when her hands were tired. The lamp beside me gave off a soft glow, the kind she used to call gentle light. Around me, the room was full, not of people, but of the quiet presence only memory can leave behind. Our wedding photo, Amanda's kindergarten handprint, laminated in plastic, the shelf full of travel books we never got around to using. I sat there for a long time, holding a mug of coffee I didn't drink, staring at the photo of Amanda as a toddler. Wide smile, scraped knee, arms outstretched like I was the whole world. Where did that little girl go? The question didn't come with bitterness, just a kind of slow ache that starts somewhere in the ribs and spreads outward. I had raised her with everything I had: steady hands, quiet mornings, second jobs when needed. Carolyn and I gave her a life built on trust, on showing up, on doing the hard thing because it was right. Now she wouldn't even face me to explain what she'd done. Not a call, not a knock on the door, just texts, deletions, avoidance, and silence. I tried to picture what she tells herself, that I'm overreacting, that I'm old-fashioned, that Bryce is just handling things so she doesn't have to. Maybe she thinks I'll cool off, that I'll let it go. But this wasn't a fight about tone or expectations. This was about being erased by the very person I'd spent my life trying to protect. And in that moment, sitting in her mother's chair, surrounded by the ghosts of every bedtime story, every lunchbox packed, every apology whispered after a storm, I realized the real cost of all this. They didn't just take a house, they took the last piece of family that still felt like mine. The county registrar's office was quiet that morning, just the low hum of printers and the occasional shuffle of paper from behind the plexiglass window. I handed the clerk the envelope Lydia had prepared and watched her eyes scan the first page, then the second. She didn't ask questions. She just nodded, stamped the form, and typed something into her system. That was it. 3 signatures, 1 filing, and the sale clause was triggered. Lydia met me outside, coat already folded over her arm, her briefcase balanced neatly at her side. She didn't say much, just asked if I wanted to be present for the walkthrough. I told her yes. Not out of pettiness, not for show. I needed to see it through, to the last inch of it. She made the arrangements that afternoon. The revocation of financial assistance was now public record. Alongside it, a formal notice of intent to sell, a document that removed any illusions about control. As of that moment, the property couldn't be sold, rented, refinanced, or altered without my written consent, and any income derived from it, legally frozen pending resolution. Bryce's Airbnb side hustle had just hit a wall, and whether Amanda knew or not, they were about to feel the impact. I spent the evening organizing the binder again, adding a new section for official filings. I included a copy of the stamped revocation and printed the confirmation email Lydia forwarded with the realtor's name and appointment details. I made sure everything was clear, neat, labeled. Not because I expected a legal challenge, though that was possible, but because if it came, I'd meet it head-on, with facts and time on my side. For 3 years, they'd built comfort on my trust. Now, Every step they took would rest on notice. They wanted me out of their lives quietly. But I don't believe in quiet endings. The sign went in the lawn before they landed. A bright orange rectangle, bold letters in black, for sale, private sale, no contingencies. The realtor, a woman named Darcy who Lydia had worked with before, planted it herself. She stood on the lawn, clipboard in hand, unbothered by the sprinkler still ticking away near the driveway. Said she liked to get ahead of the questions. By the time Amanda and Bryce pulled into the cul-de-sac, their suitcases still rattling in the back of a rental SUV, the sign had already drawn 2 neighbors out onto their porches. One of them, Greg, I think, gave me a small nod as I stepped out from behind my truck and walked toward the sidewalk. Bryce saw me first. His face didn't change right away. Just a blink. Then a pause, and then that familiar tension in his jaw. Amanda got out slower. She looked tired, sunburned, worn out in a way I hadn't seen before. When her eyes landed on me, she stopped short. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Bryce slammed the car door. "What the hell is this?" Darcy answered before I could. "The property is being sold. Notice has been filed. Owner of record is Mr. Jennings." She nodded toward me. Calm, professional. Already flipping a page on her clipboard like this was just another address on the list. Bryce took a step forward, chest out like he wanted to reclaim some piece of the front yard that used to feel like his. "You can't do this. This isn't legal." I didn't move, just met his eyes. I already did. Amanda's voice broke in from behind him, softer. "Dad, what is this?" I turned to her, and for a second, I almost softened. But then I remembered the message, the silence, the weekends they made money while pretending I didn't exist. "This is accountability," I said, "and it's long overdue." She didn't answer, just stared at the sign. Bryce looked like he was about to speak again, to escalate, to push. But Darcy was already calling a second agent on her phone, stepping onto the porch like it belonged to someone else now. Because legally, it did. I waited until they were both standing still, not pacing, not shouting, just quiet, stunned by the sign, the agent, the sudden shift in air that comes when something you thought was yours gets reclaimed in full daylight. That's when I handed Bryce the folder. It wasn't a dramatic moment. No speech, no satisfaction on my face, just the weight of paper, passed from my hands to his, one deliberate step at a time. He took it reluctantly, already shaking his head before he opened it. Inside, a copy of the loan agreement, initialed and notarized, the clause allowing for revocation. A printout of the forged contractor invoice, his sloppy version of my signature still visible in black ink. The Airbnb listing with guest reviews, nightly rates, and screenshots from 3 weekends in June. And the stamped county filing, notice of intent to sell. "This is illegal," he said, voice louder now, drawing more attention than he probably intended. I didn't answer. He flipped through the pages like speed would change the words. Amanda stood beside him, one hand across her stomach like she was holding something in. She hadn't looked at me once since I stepped onto the porch, only at the folder, and then, slowly, at the house behind her. "This is our home," she whispered. I nodded. "It was a shared investment, with conditions. You broke them." Bryce stepped forward, folder still clutched in his hand. "You're trying to ruin us." "No," I said calmly. "You did that when you turned this place into a business behind my back and signed my name like I wouldn't notice." Darcy stepped up beside me, holding her phone. "We'll need access for tomorrow's walkthrough, 10 sharp." Amanda turned away then, not toward Bryce, not toward me, just away, as if something inside her had finally caught up. I watched them both. No yelling, no gloating, just the facts, laid out and signed in ink. They wanted to be the only ones writing this story. But today, they were just reading what I had already filed. Darcy stepped onto the porch, holding her phone up like a signal flag. "The title's clear," she said. "We're good to proceed." Then, almost as an afterthought, like she was confirming a delivery, she turned to Bryce and said, "As of this filing, the seller of record is Mr. Jennings." It was the kind of sentence that lands harder in silence. Bryce's face drained of color. He opened his mouth like he was going to argue, but what came out wasn't a sentence, just a noise, like he'd missed a step in his own plan. His voice cracked as he tried to shape a reply. Amanda froze beside him, her hand still across her middle, like bracing against a wind that hadn't arrived yet. She looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment I saw it all land. Not just the sale, not just the legal filing, the fact that I had stopped asking, that I had stopped waiting, that I had moved first. Bryce stepped forward again, slower this time. His hands moved like he wanted to reason, to reshape the scene. "We can talk about this," he said. "No," I answered. "Even. You had a year to talk. You made decisions. This is mine." Neighbors were watching now. A few from porches, some behind parted curtains. One couple stood by the mailbox with their dog, pretending not to stare. Amanda looked around and finally spoke. "What are people going to think?" I didn't flinch. I finally stopped being quiet. Darcy tapped her pen against the clipboard and motioned toward the driveway. "I'll need access inside, photos and measurements." Neither of them moved. Bryce looked down at the folder still in his hands like it might suddenly burst into flames. But it didn't. It just sat there. Paper, ink, consequences. And as I turned to leave, I didn't feel lighter. I just felt clear. By the time the realtor's team arrived the next morning, the block already knew. Darcy's photographer parked across the street, adjusted his lens like this was any other listing. But it wasn't. You could feel it in the air. That thick stillness when people pretend they're not watching something fall apart in real time. Amanda stood on the porch when I got there, arms folded, face tight. Her voice was low. "You didn't have to humiliate us." I nodded, not defensive, just honest. "I didn't. You did that when you thought I wouldn't hold you accountable." Inside, the place looked the same. Clean, curated, polished for strangers. The couch was fluffed. The kitchen staged with neutral fruit bowls. You could still smell lemon cleaner. It was clear they'd kept the house in shape, probably for guests, not for living. Darcy walked room to room with quiet professionalism, snapping pictures, noting dimensions. Bryce followed her at a distance, jaw tight, muttering about privacy. Out front, I caught sight of Mark, the HOA president, walking up the drive with his clipboard. "Morning," he said. "Too cheerful. Just wanted to clarify. You're the seller on record now?" I didn't blink. "Yes." He nodded once, then looked toward Bryce and Amanda through the window. "Well, that's something." He didn't say more. He didn't need to. By noon, the sign was updated with a QR code. The listing went live 2 hours later. 3 inquiries came in before dinner time. The house was priced to move. Amanda sat on the front steps after everyone left. She didn't cry, like in the movies, just sat there, staring at the lawn, as if it might offer some answer the rest of us missed. Bryce came out to talk twice. She didn't respond either time. I stood across the street by my truck, arms crossed, watching the sun drop behind the trees. They thought the worst thing that could happen was losing comfort. They hadn't yet realized it was being seen for who they'd become. It sold in 11 days. No drawn-out haggling. No 11th hour negotiation. The buyer came in with cash, above asking, no contingencies. Just wanted a clean transfer and a quick close. Darcy said she hadn't seen one move that fast in months. Lydia handled the paperwork. I signed at the title office on a Tuesday morning, same suit I wore to Amanda's wedding. Still fit. still sharp. She wasn't there. Neither was Bryce. They'd already packed up most of the house. Movers came late at night. Quiet, discreet. I heard from a neighbor that Bryce made a scene trying to keep the porch swing. Claimed it had memories. He left it behind anyway. I stood outside for a minute after signing, holding the check. The number was exact. Every dollar I'd put in, plus legal fees, plus a little extra from the market upswing. Lydia had itemized it all. There was nothing left to guess. Amanda sent one message. No greeting, no apology. Just, "We're staying with Bryce's cousin for now. Please don't contact me." I read it once and didn't respond. Not out of spite. Not anymore. Some debts don't get collected in words. I drove home slow that day, letting each mile peel something away. Not regret, not grief, just the last cling of wondering whether I'd done the right thing. They made choices. I enforced boundaries. And in the end, I walked away with my name, my proof, and peace. The photo albums stayed in the closet. The birdhouse Amanda built when she was 9 still hangs on the back fence. I didn't erase her. I just stopped waiting for her to remember who I was.